With that, I'd like to open it up to the floor for any questions.
So if you got any questions, why don't you line up out here? We'll take questions for next 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll have a 15 minutes break. And we'll come back with the next set of questions. So any questions so far? Nope?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, is it audible?
Yeah, can you hear? Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Anchor. That is good. What I wanted to know is, I had recently about one and a half month. I've gone.
I'm sorry, we're actually not able to hear you very clearly. Sunil,
Yeah,
are you able to
Tony
repeat
can
it
help
closer
with
to
you.
the...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is it audible now? Hello.
I'm really sorry. Sunil, can you repeat the question or just come closer to the front of the stage?
Hi, Anchor. Is it now? Is it audible, or is it my accent that is? Hello. Yeah, go ahead. He's not responding? Hello. Okay, my question
the hall
is.
huge, so that's why the echo is very loud.
The echo is loud?
Yeah, can you come, Sunil, could you just repeat it? Could you come
Okay.
to the stage, Sunil, and just repeat whatever questions they ask on the stage?
Okay. So why don't you do one thing? Why don't you stand right out here, and you'll be able to ask.
Hi, Anchor.
Hey there.
Hi.
Hey.
Is it now? Is it good? Is it audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I've gone through a video for Tizen, which is an upcoming open source model supported by Samsung and Docomo. These guys, mobile carrier and manufacturers, are supporting it right now. And what they are doing actually is they are trying to port the HTML web pages as it is as an application to the open source natively. So what I wanted to see is there is there a direction in which Android is going to take this application development? Because these days there is a two community. One who wants to develop the app, but there are he doesn't have a coding knowledge, or he knows HTML5 and PHP and normal web technology, not Java. And there are developers who know Java, but do not have ideas to work with web. So there are two set of communities in Android, that as far as I see. I might be wrong. But so is that a direction that which Android might take down the line, or is it already in place? What is it?
Sure. So I guess let me answer it this way. Android has always been about choice, and we're not trying to necessarily say that you should always build native apps or you should always build web apps. You have that flexibility today. You can make that decision, based on whatever your skill set is or whatever your preference for technology is. You can build either of them. The one thing that we will say, however, is that the thing you should consider more than anything else is your users. You should always put the user experience first. So if you are able to accomplish a great user experience with a native app or with a web app, that's great. If you find that it's taking, that you can't accomplish it with one or the other, then you really need to reevaluate. Because at the end of the day, your users are going to give you feedback, or they're going to buy your apps based on how good the experience is. So by all means, use whatever technology suits you best. And certainly with web apps and using, encapsulating them in a web view, you can achieve some great results. But it may require some more work than what is offered to you in the default Android framework. So you kind of have to weigh up. Is it more work for you to learn the Android framework and implement a Java app? Or can you leverage your skills in web development and still put that extra effort in to make it feel like a native app and provide a really great user experience?
Yeah, I think also another thing to consider is, are you guys planning to introduce some new experience on the mobile front? For example, like adding like sensor or using gesture, different kind of input, only like the native version can provide. or still better be done in the native version? I mean, if that's the case, probably building a native app it will be a better choice. And but at the same time, if you already have a mobile service or platform already in place, building a lightweight client with web view probably is a good option. So it's really case by case, and also depends on what your your current capability already have. So.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions? Come on here, we have to, yeah. Just queue up.
Hi, I have a C++ application, and what I did was I cross-compiled to Java, but what I want to know is that is it the robust way to develop an application, or should I wrote my application again in Java? So did you got the question?
Sorry, Sunil, could you come to the front and just repeat what's being
Yeah,
asked?
why don't you come out here and do the same thing what you did? Yeah, why don't you come out here?
Hi, okay, so my application is written in C++ basically, and what I want to do is to import it on it Android platform. So what I did is cross-compiled it on the Java platform. But since I'm going to release it in sometime future, so what I want to know is this a robust way to develop an application? Because it depends on so many things. So when my new platform comes, so maybe I have to do something again. So I just want to know what is the...
Yeah, very, very good question, actually. So in general, for cross-platform development, you can use C++ as a way of doing that, achieving that. And the tools that you need to use for that is what we call the NDK, the Native Development Kit, which will compile your C++ code to an ARM binary that runs on Android. The thing that I should, I guess, caution you about is that the NDK has a bit of a learning curve, because it's more work than just building a native app yourself. So have a look at what you think how that learning curve is, because at some point there might be a trade-off between implementing some parts of it, like the user interface, in a native Java app on Android, and just leaving the sort of the computational heavy stuff in a C++ library that you link in. And in some ways that actually works quite well, because then you can have a user interface that's really well defined for a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, but the grunt work of your app, and I'm not sure what type of app it is, but the grunt work of your app can be within the library itself.
Okay, I have one more question. So
sure.
Suppose if I have an application P, okay, so what I want to know is what kind of files and process states that my application P is using. So is there any function call or system call to know that what my process P, application P is using, so that I can configure it for further things like virtualization or other things? Means it's just an idea.
No, I didn't understand the question. Did you, Tony?
Yeah, so I have an application P, okay. So it has some process variables, stacks, registers, okay, and some open file tables, like it is accessing some file. So what I want to know is that can I manipulate those things in Android? Is there a way or a function like we have in operating systems, like system calls or those things? So do we have that kind of support in Android?
So from a developer tools point of view, yes. You can fire up your developer tools and see what open files you have, and use device monitor and systrace to get all sorts of metrics. As to whether there's an API that you can use at runtime, I don't think so, because basically apps are sandbox, so you're not supposed to be able to see what other apps are doing. In terms of the open files that you have, that your process has by itself, if you want to find that sort of thing out at runtime, I think you'd probably have to track it yourself. But certainly the developer tools from a development standpoint can help you. I just don't know how you want to use that information in your app itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Ankur and Tony, we got one more question. Windows 8 is providing support for C++ and JavaScript to build native apps. Is Android willing to provide similar support?
Well, it's already there. So, as I just mentioned, you can use the NDK to build C++ apps right now, and you've been able to do it for many years. And obviously JavaScript as well. I mean, yeah, you can write your app and encompass it in a web view, and basically render some HTML and that has some JavaScript in it, and it runs today. It always has.
Okay, cool. We got one more.
All right, Sunil, this should be the last question from a timing point of view.
Hello.
All right.
This is Shankla. Recently, I was trying to develop an application using NDK, and when I was trying to, run that thing, at the first it asked me to use something called as NDK build. So for that, it asked me that I have to have some Linux or Unix platform for that. So I installed a third-party Cygwin, and I run the NDK build, the command over there. But even after running that command, and I was trying to run the same file in Eclipse, I'm using Eclipse here at the IDE. So when I was trying to run there, again it was saying there was an error saying that the NDK build has not been run. Can I know why exactly this error was there?
So, Tony, do you want to answer this, or do you want me to?
Well, I guess it's kind of like a special case, right? I think we need more information to troubleshoot this kind of thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. Look, it's hard to guess right now what's happened, but typically my experience with Cygwin has been that it requires a bit of work in order to set up an environment, because a lot of these Unix tools that are used are not native to the Windows platform. So it might be something as trivial as setting up the right environment variables for your Cygwin environment, or it could be something a bit more sophisticated. It's really hard to tell based on the information that we have right now, but if you're able to contact us on G+, or better yet, put up a post on Stack Overflow with the Android tag, then we can certainly look into your specific case and debug it further.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. With that, we come to the end of first session. A huge round of applause for Tony and Ankur. So we'll take a 10 minutes break. We'll all be seated. If you want to grab coffee or something like, you can still do, but we are just taking 10 minutes break. And our next 45 minutes topic will be about UI and UX on Android. Okay? So we'll be joining you in another 10 minutes, Ankur and Tony. Thank you. Okay, are we ready to go, Ankur?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Over to you guys.
All right.
All right, welcome back. So the next session, we are going to talk about design. And to start with, Ankur is going to talk to you guys about style. And here you go, Ankur.
Thanks, Tony. So, Tony mentioned before about something called DPs. We wanted to make sure that everyone sort of understands what they are, but let's talk a little bit about generally building user interfaces for Android. Android is a very big ecosystem of devices, small and large, and you typically don't need every single device to build for it. So, you can actually build user interfaces that are flexible, and we have the tools in place for you to do that. So, this presentation is really going to be about, well, how do you build some of those, well, what should you be considering building flexible layouts? And then, what is it that defines an Android app? So, the things that we always sort of tell people is don't make assumptions about the resolution of a device or the size of its screen. Use the tools that we've provided, and we're going to talk about those. But first, let's talk about something called DPs. Now, Tony mentioned DPs when he started talking about the Nexus 7 section, and there may have been people in the audience that said, well, I know what a pixel is, but I don't really understand what a DP is. So DPs is a unit that we introduced that stands for Device Independent Pixels. Now, that doesn't map to exactly a pixel, because what we knew is that when Android was being built, we knew that it was going to run on all sorts of devices with, some screens. You could have two 4-inch devices, 4-inch screens standing side by side, but those devices may have different screen resolutions. So at that point, you have to start thinking about screen density. And if you only define your sizes of UI in terms of pixels, then as the density of the screen changes, your user interface becomes less usable. So if you think about a button which you say is 50 by 50, on a low density screen that button will be quite big. But on a high density screen, that button's going to look really small. And that's not really good for touch interaction, where you really, people are using their fingers. Some people have skinny fingers, some people have bigger fingers. So you want to make a user interface that's easy to touch. And you want to make sure that those touch elements translate well to the different device sizes. So DPs really, they're a virtual unit of measurement, but they're kind of about specifying physical dimensions. So it's almost like saying, if you're saying something that is measured in DPs, you're kind of saying, I want it to be X centimeters tall or millimeters tall. So firstly, let's go back to the basics. Let's talk about, well, what is a DP? We define a DP to be 1 pixel at 160 dpi. Now, some screens are going to have a higher density than that. It's going to be more than 160 dpi, and others are going to be, lower than that. So we'd introduce these buckets. But firstly, let's look at something that designers might want to know. So if you're someone that uses Photoshop extensively, you might be saying, but I don't know things in DP, so how do I provide my assets? But you can actually convert that quite easily to the number of pixels for your Photoshop assets by using this formula, okay? But let's talk about flexible user interfaces. I'm going to show you a grid here of 4 buckets that we've defined. And you can think of these buckets as low DPI. DPI, by the way, stands for dots per inch. So low, medium, high, and extra high. And now what you'll see in this diagram is that at LDPI, we have a 3 by 3 grid, which means 9 pixels. At MDPI, we have 16 pixels because it's 4 by 4. And it gets higher and higher as you go to the higher DPIs. But the important thing to realize is, even though the number of pixels varies in each of those buckets, the number of DPs is exactly the same. Because DPs are, as I said, a measure it kind of represents physical measurement. So 160 DPI, as we said at the top, is actually the same as MDPI. So when we look at these 4 grids, MDPI is going to be a pixel per DP match. So that MDPI is 16 pixels, but it's also 16 DPs because it's 4 DPs by 4 DPs. And when we look at that in LDPI, HDPI, and XHDPI, they're all going to be 4 by 4 DP. The number of pixels that are used to represent those DPs will vary, but in terms of DPs, it stays the same. Now, it's really important to understand this because it's a fundamental definition of building flexible user interfaces. DPs maps to a physical type of measurement. Pixels maps to exact, like the number, like dots that are shown on the screen. Okay? So the thing you need to realize here is that regardless of which bucket we're in, it's 4 by 4 DPs here. Let's move on. Now that we know what DPs are, let's talk about some metrics that we use. So when we build our own apps, what we say is that a phone is typically between 320 dps to 360 dps in terms of its width. And you're going to hear me talk about something called smallest width. Now let me tell you what that is. You can hold a device in portrait mode or landscape mode. So smallest width basically says what's the smallest dimension out of those 4, smallest measurement out of those 4. So regardless of which way you're holding it up, what's the smallest value there? So phones, we consider smallest width to be 320 to 360 dps. Tablets vary. Tony mentioned earlier that the 7-inch tablets, we consider them to be at about 600 dps and goes upwards from there. So when you are targeting your layouts and you're saying, hey, I want to build an app, a single app that runs on phones and looks great on phones,